So with that, I get the privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, which I am super excited about. Again, another Jennifer. That seems to really be the name of the day today. But I get to introduce Dr. Jen Harvey. So Reverend Dr. Jen Harvey is a writer, speaker, and professor of religion at Drake University, where I know she has not had much sleep this week, helping engage the community and support the students there. She serves as the faculty director, as Marty mentioned this morning, for the Cru Scholars Program. She has a PhD in Christian ethics from Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York. Her work focuses primarily on racial justice and white anti-racism. Dr. Harvey's most recent books include Raising White Kids, Bringing Up Children in a Racially Unjust America, and Dear White Christians for those still looking for racial reconciliation. Dr. Harvey has contributed to the New York Times. She's been a guest on CNN and National Public Radio, and she's a widely sought after public speaker. And we're really proud that she's in our very own community, and it's our privilege to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Good morning. Thank you for that introduction, excuse me. Jennifer's the name, not of the moment, it's the name of 1970, 71, 72. So now you know how old we all are in this room. And I want to really extend my appreciation to the folks who invited me to be with you all today. It means a great deal to be here, even more so having come from the Drake campus and the difficult events we've all been going through this week together in that space. So my name's Jennifer Harvey. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm so excited to be here because while I do get to speak in many places these days, I'm a citizen of Des Moines. And I care deeply about the kind of civic environment we're creating here. And so I want to start off my time by saying two things that I know to be true. The first is that whatever your identities, plural actually, every single person in this room has a role to play in transforming the environments that we are all working, playing, and living in for inclusion and equity for all of us. Every single person in this room. And that's something we are really, I believe, starting to learn and understand and make actionable at Drake University. And so I hope you leave this day more mobilized and galvanized than you were when you came in, whatever that means for you. We're in different places in our work on this journey, and so we all need to take more steps every day. And the second thing I know to be true is that building alliances across differences, which is ultimately what the work of inclusion requires, is not always about how strong our desire is to create inclusive space. Desire matters, don't get me wrong, but we can desire cross-racial alliances, we can desire culturally competent practices, we can desire solidarity between heterosexual people and LGBTQ people, and still not know how to do it. And so my comments today come from the latter place. I assume we're here because we have the desire for inclusion, and that to the extent we are still working and needing to do more to realize that vision, that it's primarily about a lack of strong tools, which I'm amazed to hear how many concrete tools you are all sharing with each other today. Now, it's not always mutually exclusive. Sometimes we don't have enough desire. Sometimes we don't have enough tools. But the reason it's so important to discern the difference between those two things is because a lack of desire in our spaces requires one set of strategies to implement and mobilize for inclusion. A lack of tools requires a different set of strategies. And so we have to get more and more wise about what it is we're contending with, I think, to develop good strategies. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story, since we're working with stories today. A little bit about my journey to this microphone. I am a very out lesbian. I identify as a queer person who is also an American Baptist ordained minister. You can chuck, yes. That is probably the most interesting story I could share with you, but that's not the story I'm going to tell. I'm also a white middle-class woman who is also a parent. I have 2 young children, and I started my life in Denver, Colorado, attending Denver public schools in the early 70s when lots of us were getting named Jennifer during mandated busing. Mandated busing for integration. And so demographically, I was a racial minority in my earliest years of elementary school. Most of my first friends were black. And by the time I got to middle and high school, the schools I was in were still very, very multiracial, sort of like Des Moines Public Schools, but almost all of the kids in my core accelerated classes were white because of racial tracking. And I noticed this. I didn't have language for it. I didn't know why it was. I didn't know how to ask about it, but I noticed it. I was also raised in a very white, very conservative Christian family. The core teaching of my family's life was God so loves the world. And when I got to college, I started asking some questions about that. So if God so loves the world like all of us, how can my male colleagues sit here and debate whether or not women can be ordained? If God so loves the world, like the whole world, why is it these same men are driving, some of them, Mercedes-Benz down the street right past homeless people, homeless men, women, and children on the streets of Santa Barbara, California, where I was in school, on their way back to class to debate my status as a woman in the church? Didn't God have some feelings about that? So I won't tell you more about that journey except to say this. In that same period of my life, I discovered that Christianity was more diverse than I knew it to be prior to that point, as is the case for all religious traditions. And I encountered a version of Christianity rooted in liberation theology, and the short version, the non-nerdy academic version of liberation theology is this. God so loves the world actually does mean the whole world, all of us, which also means God actually cares about all parts of human life, including humanly caused suffering that manifests as sexism and racism and economic oppression and homophobia and ableism and on and on. And so, because God so loves the world, God must be a God of justice and equity. Well, justice. We can add equity to that, though. We can't have justice if we don't have equity. So my most important encounter at that moment in my life, and I see some folks in this room who will recognize this name, was with the work of James Cone, who just passed actually this spring. We lost a giant in this country, and James Cone was the father of Black liberation theology, and Cone wrote this: okay, if God so loves the world, which means God must be a God of justice, then God must be black. Because a God of justice is always with the oppressed who are experiencing the most severe forms of injustice. It's flawless logic, really. And this powerful message sort of clicked for me because it offered me some ways to navigate those questions I was having as a college student, but it also clicked to make sense of lots of what I had experienced growing up in Denver, Colorado, in very multiracial schools that were also deeply unjust. And so in that young, upstart way that so many youth do, especially if they assume the world works for them, I said, well, I'm going to go to Union Theological Seminary in New York City, and I'm going to go study with this man, Dr. James Cone. And so that's what I did. So I got to Union in my early 20s, and I'm running around New York City, which I had never been to before I just moved there, sort of like I did when I moved Brooklyn to Des Moines. And I was running around on this campus going, well, I love the Black Jesus. God is black. But I was doing this in this amazing community a very deeply multiracial community, feminist community, a pro-LGBT community, and there were these powerful African American men and women there, especially students, who kind of looked at me and said, good for you. Have you noticed something, white girl? And the white girl part counts here. Because they said to me, you don't get to just do it like that. You don't get to run around here just loving the black Jesus. You have to figure out what being white means, while you make sense out of claiming to be committed to racial justice. And so I'm starting with my story, that part of my story, because that's how 20 years later I'm ending up on this stage with this microphone, because I've been working at that for more than 20 years now, and I will be doing this work for the rest of my life. And I'm so grateful for those men and women. So one of the things that I've seen clearly in the last 20 years or so of my own life, in this journey, I've seen clearly the ways that a lack of particular and specific attention to race and to racism, but also to the cultures of whiteness, deeply impact and impede our work for inclusion, for true inclusion, deeply challenges our ability to create robust multiracial alliances